strange having such a huge photo of my face behind me. Thank you for having me. I know it's been a long day and it's kind of towards the end, but I'm very happy to be here. We were joking earlier that I only get invited to Kuwait to talk about Iraq. وترى أبويا بصراوي فإحنا جيرانكم and من أجيكم أشم ريحة بلدي وأحس نفسي بين أهلي. So I'm very happy to be here today. So today's talk, I think as opposed to some of the earlier things, is actually quite specific, but it is talking about a theme or an issue that is quite widespread and pertinent in this part of the world especially, or in areas of conflict. But I'm going to use the example of kind of one particular case study, a research project that I've been working on for about a year and a half now. But it's divided into 3 chapters, really. So the first chapter, I will kind of be giving you a little bit of an overview to contextualize kind of the state of cultural heritage in Iraq through a very narrow lens, which is my kind of recent trip to Baghdad for the first time in like 23 years. And then I will go into the project, the research on Minaret Anah, its history, its significance. And then the last part is just sort of a little bit of an overview of how as an artist or as a creative practitioner, you kind of engage with that kind of research or respond to it through some sort of artistic response, I guess. And I couldn't start a conversation about cultural heritage without, of course, the Iraq Museum, which is kind of on the one hand the site of the kind of greatest repository of ancient Mesopotamian artifact, but also the site of the greatest loss. So in the kind of 36 hours following the US invasion of Baghdad, 15,000 items were looted and lost. And luckily about half have been returned, but there's still so much that is kind of on a daily or weekly basis is being found across borders and so on. And then another thing that I kind of wanted to point to is Jawad Salim's Nasb al-Hurriya, which I think in the past month has become such an iconic image, especially with what's going on in Baghdad. What I love about this work is that, it's kind of inspired by Assyrian reliefs built following the 1958 revolution. And to this day, kind of speaks to shared values or aspirations that kind of resonate with people. So how can culture actually defy any sort of temporal bounds? And I also wanted to show kind of, the Nasb al-Hurriya is sort of about triumph, but then there's also loss. So the kind of Shaheed monument by Ismail Fattah al-Turk that creates a kind of space or void for commemoration. And I wanted to show some of Muhammad Ghani Hikmat's sculptures around Baghdad. This is Shahrazad Shahriyar, and then also Al-Mutanabbi, Kahramana, that takes folk tales, myths, shared stories, and kind of gives them form throughout the city. So how do you give something that is maybe intangible, some sort of form? And then his most recent work before he passed away was one called Inqad al-Iraq. And so the way he alludes to that is actually through kind of a cuneiform scroll that is being rebuilt communally. And so there's always this kind of sense of a return to heritage, and heritage not being something kind of static, but something that is, constantly shaping who we are. And that is something that is really important in my work, is that, a lot of people are like, oh, why are you so focused on the past? But the past is very much an active agent in shaping our identity and shaping our outlook towards the future and its values. And so when looking at the past, kind of on the other hand, you see the way it's been kind of deteriorating. So these are the ruins of Babylon, kind of left to fade away in a way. And it's gone through multiple assaults. So that it was a UNESCO listed site that, once Saddam decided to kind of build on top of the ruins, it gets removed. And so you see here that even the layers of brick, the kind of original brick that is sort of rotting away, and then his new bricks kind of built on top of them. And of course the icon of that is the brick that's inscribed with his name, seeing himself as Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon himself. And these became kind of collector items. So in the US occupation, there were also Polish troops that were stationed there. You'll find the the building almost has like broken teeth, these bricks that were taken away and looted and sold. Meanwhile, this is something I saw with my own eyes, there's kind of like 4,000-year-old bricks with cuneiform inscriptions that are discarded, broken around garbage at the same time. This is we were talking a lot about the Ishtar Gate because I kind of wear it around my neck, but this is what's left of it, the one that wasn't moved to moved to Berlin. And you see again deterioration. The site isn't well kept. There's water damage seeping into the bricks. This is another temple that's on the site that's sort of collapsing. These are the ruins of Tal Qisra, and Tal Qisra is significant not like as an architectural site in the history of architecture because it's the largest non-reinforced single-span brick structure, and it's a beautiful, beautiful space. When I went there, there were these Qadiri pilgrims. They follow Abdul Gailani, and they were kind of visiting this site because it has significance to him. I think he was born there or buried there. And they were singing this kind of beautiful hymn that echoed in the space that had the most incredible acoustics. But again, you see deterioration. It's open to air. The site isn't well maintained. And I think, beyond built heritage, you see the sort of aftermath of conflict. I think the most heartbreaking scene for me was seeing these palm groves that were kind of burnt and destroyed by US forces because they were kind of trying to punish the farmers for hiding or concealing resistance fighters. So it's not just kind of like structural damage, but also to the landscape itself. So Minaret Anah. How did I this sort of came to me by chance, by surprise, and it's been kind of a love affair. I was looking at, in my kind of research on cultural heritage, I was also looking at the forces that threaten it. And I was curious to see what sort of damage, let's say, ISIS has inflicted on cultural sites in Iraq. And in this unfortunately long list, the one name jumped at me, which was Minaret Anah, because my grandfather's from Anah. And I knew a story of a town that was sort of drowned, its people relocated, and so I was kind of curious to find out more. And the very first image I saw was this one. And what's kind of really special about it is that it was actually photographed by Gertrude Bell during her travels in Iraq in 1909. And you see the structure is an octagonal structure, 8 floors. Each floor has a kind of unique niche design, these carved niches that interchange between, you see like kind of a single arch and a double arch, and it sort of ends with a cupola. And there's some people say that, it was actually more of a kind of lighthouse because the remains of a mosque that they kind of excavated near it, it's not really attached to a mosque, but the mosque, it predates the mosque. But anyway, it dates back to the Uqaylid dynasty, which is kind of, let's say, built, so it was built somewhere between the 10th and 11th century. And just to kind of give you a bit of context, Anah is located on the Euphrates, western Iraq, very close to the border with Syria. And the site of the minaret is actually in an island called Qal'at Anah, which was the original settlement. And it's an island that is in the very center of the Euphrates. And so you see that the minaret is kind of located in this kind of right side of the island. And this is what it kind of looks like. So this is actually another photograph by Bell where she's atop the minaret looking down at the Euphrates. And she has a really beautiful description of Anah in her diary where she says, Anah is 3 hours long and 1 street wide. It has a very Babylonish look with its palms and its mud-built street filled with the sound of nawa'ar, which are water wheels, and you can see them along the water edge there, and the river washing its feet. Which is such a kind of beautiful description. And some say that the nawa'ar actually date back, like some researchers are saying, to the Akkadian time, that it was really invented in this area around this time. And really that was it. It was just this sort of like photos by Bell, this one archaeological report, and I was searching for more. And it somehow, again, through chance, family, Ibn Am, Jiran, Madri Minu, I came upon this man, Yusuf al-Daham, who's been my primary collaborator in this project. He's an archaeologist from Anah. And he's been instrumental in kind of like really broadening this research and enriching it. And so this is from our trip to the Iraq Museum. There's a little gypsum cast of the building. And this is us. Actually, he was showing me an old map of Anah and pointing to my great-grandfather's house. So that was also very special. So to go back to the history of the minarets, you saw from the 1909 photo that it was really in kind of deteriorating state due to, let's say, wind and kind of natural erosion. And then in 1937, the Iraqi Department of Antiquities, which was founded by Bell, takes on this project as its very first restoration project. So they work on kind of renovating the body of the minaret, and they actually stabilize its base as well. And life goes on in Anah. This is kind of like picture of day-to-day life on the river, taking boat rides across to the islands that had many orchards, visiting the minaret, a very lush landscape. Actually, the island يسموها جزيرة اللباد, so من لبدة الأسد, because of how kind of you can see how it's kind of covered with palm trees and greenery. And then, I mean, so sort of life continued up until the late 70s, early 80s, where there was a intention to build a dam. At the time, it was called Qadisiyya Dam, now called Haditha Dam, to control there was a lot of conflict with, let's say, Turkey, Syria about the water in the Euphrates, and they wanted to control it, and the repercussions of which, and so you see here what happened with the dam project is the kind of like the basin that ends up drowning Anah completely. And so there were plans then to relocate its people and into a new city. And before that, they basically launched this sort of excavation project and actually identified 83 sites of archaeological significance or historic significance. And they said that it would take 34 years to actually excavate all these sites, but they only gave them 4. And so they had to save what's important. And obviously the minaret was one of those projects. So how do we save this minaret? I mean, one proposal was just actually, why don't we just let it drown and build a new one? But that obviously didn't happen. Then another proposal that you see here was to build a kind of moat around it that protected it from the rising water levels. This proposal was to actually elevate it above sea level, kind of raise its foundations. And then this proposal, which is what they ended up going for, was actually to kind of dismantle the structure, to slice it up into sections, build a bridge that connected the island to the mainland, and transport it and reconstruct it once again. And this is kind of photos from the process. And I think there's a couple of videos that I wanted to show. I just wanted to give you a sense of this process. We can skip quickly. I think we're running out of time. So this is, it's shaky video footage, but this is it in its site, kind of boarded up and ready to be dissected. Can we skip? And so these are the kind of different sections that were then transported to the new site. So you see them here kind of dismantling it. Next video. I also wanted to give you a little glimpse of kind of, this is like this incredible video by the Iraqi government kind of showing off this new modern city that they had built for the people. We can also skip, just kind of briefly, but modern housing, schools, and kind of really showing this as actually much better for the people, to be uprooted because they will get a more kind of modern way of living. Okay, so we can go to the next one. And then I also wanted to show you footage of the submersion itself, so the rising seawaters. And we can also skip here. So these are the waters of the Euphrates rising, and you see here that it's really just the top of the palm tree that's peeking out now. So at this point, everyone had moved, the minaret had moved, and the people kind of started a new life elsewhere. And so it was rebuilt in this new site, and this is a very ominous photo from March of 2006 that Yusuf took, actually, because 3 months later, basically what happens is that there was an American, so this is obviously after the invasion, there's an American sniper stationed at the top because it's the highest point in the city, and the Al-Qaeda bombed it and destroyed it. So this is what's left. It was sort of reduced to rubble. Luckily, there was a sort of group of Iraqi archaeologists. I was going to use a foul language, but I chose not to. That kind of banded together, and after many years trying to get funding, finally succeeded in getting that, and were able to secure some funds from the Iraqi government to actually rebuild it. And it was like an entirely local effort. It received very little attention in Iraq. Because Anbar is a kind of province that is sort of out of the way, it's a bit forgotten, and that's another reason this project is so special to me. So they kind of clear the rubble, try to save as much of the original bricks as they can, and kind of start this process of reconstruction. And I like to show this slide because it's interesting how kind of like, cultural heritage can then also be tied politically to the state. And so you see here like في عهد المنصور, and then people scratch off Saddam Hussein. And he's an interesting protagonist in this story from the beginning. So anyway, washing the stones, starting to kind of lay the foundations and slowly rising. And so they built it from as much of the original stone as they can salvage, mixed with gypsum and lime, which was really like what the original structure is made out of. So it's a reconstruction of a form, but tries to stay as true to the original as possible. And then there was the kind of special case of like what do we do with the carved niches, because they are its kind of most important architectural element. And so they were able to produce these very precise drawings based on other historic drawings. And this is Yusuf, his like family member that owns an auto repair shop, produces these molds that they then use to kind of recast these elements onto the building. And so here it is, kind of reconstructed, and it opens to kind of big fanfare. They produce this pamphlet that kind of tells the story of the building. And then 3 years later, it's destroyed again by ISIS. So this is 2016. And so then even the new kind of stone is destroyed as well. And this is the state that the structure is in right now. And so, these are the carved niches. And so you're given this story and you're like, okay, how do I process this? How am I going to deal with this? And so I'm going to kind of give you a little glimpse of how I've been engaging with this research. So I met Yusuf in December, and he gave me like a wealth of research, and I really didn't know how to process it. And then I was invited by Jameel Art Center in Dubai as part of their Library Circles program, which is a sort of think out loud program, like, can you show us your research in progress? And just kind of like put it up, sort through it, and start kind of having a conversation around it. So these are some images from the installation that kind of showcase some of the important research documents. I also really wanted to show the human side, that it's not just about architecture, it's about a way of life. So these are family photographs from the people of Anah that were kind of displayed on the window, the reconstruction, and also like snippets of our audio conversations, our meetings, to kind of really give people a very intimate insight on this project and the process as well. I had these kind of full-scale drawings of these carved niches because I also wanted people to have a one-to-one relationship with the building, so it's not so abstract. And then some family videos and a glimpse into life in Anah. And we actually brought Yusuf out to Dubai, and we had this great conversation that was about kind of the challenges that heritage preservation specialists face in areas of conflict, and issues about whether or not to reconstruct, and so on and so forth. And then from this project, I was asked by Noura Razian, who's the curator at Art Jamil, where do you want to take this? And for me, it was very clear. So the only remnant of this whole process and what's left of the building are these molds. So remember those molds that they made to cast the carved niches? They still had them, and I really wanted to work with them. And so there they are. I got to see them, and so the process was actually to recast these molds. So maybe you don't reconstruct a whole building, but can you take an element that is quite significant and produce something that is not only an object of contemplation, but also an educational tool? So could it be that someone who wanted to study this building in the future could refer back to these molds and kind of understand its scale, its dimensions, its materiality, and so on and so forth? So I went out to Ramadi this time. I inched a bit closer to Anah, and I got to work with local craftsmen on recasting these molds. So here they are, and then they were shipped to Dubai, and this is the installation and the river washing its feet, which draws from that Gertrude Bell quote. And it's on view at Jamil Art Center right now, so if you're going to Dubai any time between now and February, please do visit. So it's an installation that's comprised of 8 individual casts of each of the carved niche designs with video projections. And the video one is a kind of home video recording of a man taking his children to the edge of the water in Anah before it was submerged. And he talks to them about the minaret. He's like, oh, hi, جزيرة القلعة, هالمنارة مالتها, رح يشيلوها. And I really love this idea of kind of passing on this history, passing on these stories to his children. And then the second film is, what you kind of see in this image, is the submersion of Anah, which I also showed you little snippets of. And so it's a kind of fragmented resurrection of a history. So rather than them kind of existing in unison in the structure, they're kind of these independent fragments that are retelling a version of this fragile history. Yeah, that's sort of all I have for you today. Thank you so much. Am I okay to come?
شكرا كثير رند. We have another golden question today, it seems. So one question for us to take for Rand. Who wants to go? Going once?
Will they rebuild it? Actually, so part of the process was also reaching out to residents of Anah. We have these kind of film testimonials. That's like, what does the minaret signify to you, and do you want to rebuild it? And kind of across the board, it was like, this is my identity, this is my history. And the minaret of Anah really became almost a placeholder for the lost city, for the lost way of life. This is all that survived from their city. And to them, in the kind of 2006 destruction and the 2012 reconstruction, that was a triumph, that was a triumph against forces of evil. That was a way for them to kind of like maintain their presence. And so yes, for them, like for Yusuf especially, he says like, it will be my life's challenge, like my life's dream and purpose to rebuild it. And if they destroy it again, I will rebuild it, and I will continue to rebuild it. That is a question that for me isn't so, like I don't necessarily think that this thing should be rebuilt, because you're kind of, it's becoming like Disneyland heritage in a way, because like you're not renovating, you're not preserving, you're kind of like reconstructing a shell. Obviously, I think it's a process that needs to happen with the community. And so if the community, no matter where it is, which community, if they feel strongly that this is something that they want to do, I think by all means, they have the right to do that. But so that's why in my work, I kind of try to challenge that in a way, kind of think about like alternative ways of reconstruction. And yeah. So
one more
they're
question.
Trying to secure the funding for reconstruction.
One bonus question. Do you wish for it to be rebuilt?
Well, that's what I was just saying. I mean, I think like for the community, I think that's something that's really important, and I would love for them to kind of have that. But I don't necessarily believe that like reconstruction is necessarily the only route to commemorate, the only route to kind of learn or preserve a memory of something. So yeah. Thank you, Munira.
Thank you, Ran. This was really fantastic, and I think with the response of the audience, you can feel the power of this presentation, because we also we see this happening every day, right? Especially in Kuwait, this idea of heritage and what does it mean to have it and what does it mean to destroy it, and you bring in a lot of very powerful historic examples, and I really don't have a question, but it's something that we have to constantly think about, is the power of architecture, right? Mm-hmm. And what does it mean in terms of history, memory, people, place, context, and symbol. And so the minaret here really stands as a powerful symbol, but also a powerful structure that exists in the memory of these people and in the profession of these archaeologists and in the history of architecture and in the history of so forth and so on and so on. So this is something very important to talk about, and what does it mean to kind of have this architectural heritage, and how do we preserve it in a non-physical means as well? Because again, then it becomes like a Disneyland, right? And is that Disneyland good or bad is another question, but how do we preserve the memories, especially with new generations and new places and new cities and the destruction of the old and the destruction of the new? So how do we constantly preserve this memory? So I really don't have a question, it's more of a comment.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rand. يعطيك العافية.